America becoming a free nation didn't just happen. In fact, in 1775, at the outset of the American War for Independence, a betting man could easily have gambled that the British would win this contest. They had the strongest army and navy in the world at that time. America had no army, no navy, only a love for God and a love for liberty in their hearts. And, as it turned out, a phenomenal leader in George Washington.
Tragically, one of George Washington's trusted aides turned out to be untrustworthy. Benedict Arnold had his share of victories in the war, but he concluded that the ultimate victory would rest with the British. So at the right moment in 1780, he was determined to hand West Point in New York over to the English. It could have been the death knell of the American cause. If America fell, George Washington would have been tried for treason and surely hanged. But Arnold's betrayal was learned just in time, and he fled to live out a miserable life in the United Kingdom. He died in 1801.
Happily, the treason had been timely discovered to prevent the fatal misfortune. The providential train of circumstances which led to it affords the most convincing proof that the liberties of America are the object of divine protection. George Washington.
Discovery in time of Benedict Arnold's treachery was one example among many to George Washington in which God was protecting the American cause repeatedly in the conflict with Great Britain.
The hand of Providence has been so conspicuous in all this that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith. George Washington.
The war continued in different states. But finally, it all came to a head in the fall of 1781. General George Cornwallis decided to trap Washington and his men in a small town of Virginia, Yorktown. When the dust cleared, Cornwallis realized he was the trapped one, so he decided to flee with his troops. He wanted to pull a Washington and evacuate with his men in little boats crossing the Jamestown River. The only problem was that there was virtually no fog cover. When the little fog that was there was lifted, the British military leader was disheartened to see a plethora of French ships. The French, which had promised much earlier to help the American cause, finally had sent some ships over. Cornwallis realized his choice was simple: slaughter or surrender. He chose surrender. October 19, 1781 was the date of the Yorktown surrender. This was effectively the end of the war. But the official end of the war was not to come until 2 years later in the Treaty of Paris, 1783. The Treaty of Paris begins, "In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity." Before this treaty had officially been worked out by Ben Franklin, John Adams, John Jay, and others, there was an unusual episode that occurred between George Washington and his troops. He met with them in 1782 in New York City to say goodbye and to thank them. Unfortunately, many of them were demoralized because they were struggling to get by. Their pay was not worth a continental. Some of them even suggested that if Washington would declare himself king, they would back him up.
Immediately after the war, there was a call for George Washington to be king or to be a monarch. He knew what a monarchy would do. It would be another return to what was going on in Britain. George Washington said no. So George Washington absolutely didn't want to be king because he knew what a king would do, and it would be one person making rules rather than the majority of individuals.
George Washington was a great leader. Rather than lust after power for power's sake, he pushed away power. He has been called the American Cincinnatus, in reference to the Roman statesman who died 430 BC. He successfully served as a leader in the army during a time of crisis, and after securing victory, he retired in peace back to his home. I've seen in one of the branches of the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., a statue of George Washington dressed in Roman garb as the American Cincinnatus. Washington said, "We can never hope to be a happy nation unless we imitate Christ. Washington showed a powerful example of Christian servant leadership. For Providence Forum, I'm Jerry Newcomb.